Well, good morning, everybody. I think this has been a great conference. I just want to say one thing before we start, and that is I want to pick up on what Baroness Prashar said. When I was a very young man, I was just 25, I was working in the UN Secretary-General's office, and I was in charge of the use of good offices. So I know everything there is to know about good offices. But the thing with the UN, it's a treaty organization. So we never, ever mentioned that we were doing good offices, and we did it a lot of the time. It's terribly important, and it's been done for years now in the Secretariat. The issue of whether you go public, sometimes it's worthwhile, sometimes it's helpful not to go public. But I just wanted to say that in terms of the Commonwealth moving forward, it's vitally important that the use of good offices continues, because there's so much going on. CMAG is a bit of a sleepy old cow at the moment. Right. I've said that because I want this to be a good controversial session. And I'm going to ask Jo, I'm not going to read out CVs, I'm just going to tell you, if you don't already know, that she is the Commonwealth Envoy in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office since 2021, and she was our High Commissioner in Rwanda, and she was at CHOGM. Jo,
Thank you very much. Thanks. I need to stand up.
Please do.
Right. Morning, everybody, and thanks very much, Mark, for the introduction. Been a really interesting discussion. I particularly enjoyed last night. And Sue's challenges to us, and I'm going to, she did a great job of keeping us both engaged and awake. Thanks, Sue. And I'm going to hope I can respond today to some of the excellent points that you made. Just quickly before I start, just so you understand what my role is, because a few people have asked me. So I work for the Foreign Office, and this particular role, I sort of represent the UK at senior official level on the Commonwealth. So I sit on the Board of Governors, and I sort of help lead our Commonwealth policy. I sort of work very closely with the High Commissioners based in London. In fact, in some ways, my job is a bit like a High Commissioner. I'm credited to the Commonwealth, but I don't get the residence or the fancy car, which is rather unfortunate. I'm taking the train back like everybody else. Just before I start on the future challenges, I thought I would just, if you don't mind, just take a step back and look at what we tried to achieve as chair in office, which of course turned out to be 4 years' worth as a result of COVID. And our aspiration at the time was in 2018 was to build a fairer, more sustainable, more secure and more prosperous future for £2.5 billion. So, you know, no pressure or anything like that. We did invest over £500 million in projects and programmes. I won't go into detail of them here because we published 2 reports that you can read, but just wanted to pick out a few things because for me, I think it's really important to demonstrate what the Commonwealth does on a very practical level and how it benefits people, our Commonwealth citizens. So just a few examples. So on the fairness pillar, we've supported women's empowerment through the She Trades Commonwealth programme, which supports women entrepreneurs and has helped generate sales of more than £32 million for women-owned businesses in Nigeria and Kenya and Ghana and Bangladesh. And we've supported girls across the Commonwealth to have access to education. We've pledged another £217 million towards that at Kigali this year. And we've delivered programmes to support promotion and protection of LGBTI rights across the Commonwealth. In terms of making it more sustainable, the UK is one of the co-funders of the Commonwealth Climate Finance Hub, which I think is a brilliant programme, and we've mobilised over $45 million to support climate-vulnerable Commonwealth countries. And through the Commonwealth Marine Economies programme, we've helped 17 SIDS build sustainable marine economies. On the security side, we've supported all Commonwealth countries strengthen their cyber security, and we originally invested £15 million in that, and we've announced the equivalent in Kigali. And of course, on health security, we've worked to support countries on pandemic preparedness. And finally, on the prosperity pillar, we funded the Commonwealth Trade Facilitation Programme and launched the Commonwealth Standards Network. So that's just a brief summary, but all programmes and initiatives that had direct impact on people's lives. And whilst we can all be cynical here, and of course, there's always more that can be done, and of course the Commonwealth can always be more perfect, let's also just celebrate what we actually do achieve and those sort of, the people who, like you yourselves, who are working to make the Commonwealth a better place and are sort of really delivering on a whole gamut of issues to support the Commonwealth citizens. So moving on to the challenges, whilst we are very proud of what we achieved as chair in office, you don't need me to tell you there's a long way to go. And when we set out those challenges in 2018, that was even before we had COVID and the war in Ukraine, so things clearly got more difficult. What I would say is that both the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary, the current ones and the past ones recently, have been really clear about their enduring commitment to the Commonwealth. That has not changed. So this idea of having this diverse alliance of 56 equal independent states working in partnership, which is the genuine force for good. Now, we think that it's a really important organisation in what's a really complex geopolitical world. As I said, we know it's not perfect. And we would not create this organisation from scratch if we were doing so today. But it does work on many levels, and there is a genuine role there to act as an alternative for those countries that, against those countries that seek to undermine democracy and erode our rights and values. And beyond all of the great work that's done on policy and programmes, you don't need me to tell you that it's a fantastic global network which fosters professional and civil society and people-to-people links at breadth and a scale which is just unparalleled. And it's fantastic to be here today because conferences like this really remind me about what the Commonwealth is about in that sense. I think it's a very healthy sign that more countries want to be part of the Commonwealth family. I'll come on to that a little bit later. We can discuss the fact that so many countries are interested. I have heard a few names I wasn't aware of, I have to say, so it seems to be rather a long list building. Don't take them too seriously, is what I would say. But the point is, the sign of a respected and worthwhile institution is there are people who want to join, and people are not leaving unless they pretty much get forced off. But like all organisations and institutions, we need to evolve and we need to adapt to remain relevant and effective. So, challenges. We think we need to deliver greater benefits to citizens, and to do that, we need to be much more strategic and focused. We cannot do everything, and I think, the UK shares the blame that, we've also participated in this Christmas tree, which is what I sort of usually refer to the communiqué as, but also in terms of, the sort of work that the institutions try to do. It's everywhere, trying to be, trying to deliver for every country, and I just don't think that works, particularly not in an organisation which is expanding and where resources are diminishing. So we think that the Commonwealth should focus on where it has a comparative advantage and/or a good track record, because otherwise it's going to operate in areas where other organisations are much better placed or resourced, and there's no point in parallel institutions having these same priorities. So we in the UK have decided we want to focus on 3 particular key areas, so I thought I'd talk to you about those today. And they're trade and environment, climate and environment, and values. And so no surprises to you, right? They're the ones that classically the Commonwealth has actually got a good track record in. And across those priorities, we think there needs to be a really genuine offer for SIDS, and it needs to be underpinned by reform to make sure that the Commonwealth institutions offer the best impact and value for money. So we're still at our early stages, post-Kigali, post-chair in office, looking at, what can we deliver in Samoa or be talking about in Samoa. So I just want to give you a sense. On trade and investment, we all know about the Commonwealth advantage when it comes to trade, but we need to enhance the investment offer. Intra-Commonwealth investment has fallen by 30% over the last 7 years, while other global players, including China, their investment has increased exponentially. We need to work together to deliver enhanced benefits for members who are facing challenges in attracting inward investment. And the UK plans to look at its own investment programmes, including, for example, British Investment International, to be able to provide a clean and honest and reliable alternative to some of the other offers that are out there from other influences. With some of the most fragile and vulnerable ecosystems in the world, we really need to stay the course on climate and environment. You don't need me to tell you climate change is an existential threat for many members, and it's why the Commonwealth is a natural caucus to drive this agenda. We want to continue our leadership role following on from COP presidency and our ongoing climate commitments. And as you may know, we committed £11.6 billion of international climate finance by 25-26. We'll continue to support SIDS, as you know, who make up almost half of the Commonwealth and steward 30% of global oceans. And I think the focus on SIDS, they have this unique set of challenges, at risk from climate change, natural disasters, global economic shocks, higher proportional costs, because it comes from governing on a smaller scale, and then they face substantial economic problems and which continue even as their incomes grow. So there's a very compelling case why the Commonwealth should in particular advocate for SIDS and on SIDS issues. And I think the Commonwealth is a really powerful fora for SIDS. And I really like one of the programmes that we're involved in is the support to Commonwealth small states offices in Geneva and New York, so that those small island states have a stronger voice, can use the expertise and sort of speak up in multilateral forums. That's really important to us. So I've done trade investment, done climate environment. The last, but not least, of course, is around the rights and values. 10th anniversary of the Charter. I personally believe, and so does the government, that the values set out in the Charter are at the heart of what the Commonwealth is about. But we also see that it's challenging. We've got very diverse membership. They're all on their own journey, and they all have their own reference points. For us, what's important is the direction of travel, but acknowledge that direction is not always in the right direction. And we've seen recently those positions have been compounded by the challenging geopolitical context, with China and Russia, Ukraine, and members have their own priorities on that. But there is progress, and there are opportunities in this area. And as has been mentioned, you don't always hear about them. It's not always shouted from the rooftops. And I think the Secretary-General was quite right yesterday when she said that often respect and discretion will achieve some of the most worthwhile results. So under the banner of rights and values, I thought I'd give you a few examples of the sort of work that I think we can take forward. And LGBT plus rights and women's and girls are really important here. We all know the challenges about addressing LGBTI rights in the Commonwealth, but there's been real progress on discriminatory legislation. If you look at Singapore, Antigua and Barbuda, St Kitts and Nevis. And then there are some countries you won't have heard about who are looking at this, where the Commonwealth and organisations like the Commonwealth Equalities Network are actually doing really discreet work, talking to countries about how they can change the legislation or how they can take a different approach. But it's done in a discreet way. Long way to go, of course. There are still 30 countries that criminalise consensual same-sex relationships. But I do think it's going generally in the right direction. Women's and girls, the Commonwealth is always going to be a powerful voice for gender empowerment. And I've talked about the trade programme. We're also really proud of our programmes to give nearly 1 million girls access to 12 years of quality education by 2025, really practical issues. We've already talked today about the media freedom principles. We're really delighted that law ministers endorsed that last month. It was not a given, I can tell you. And a real shout out to William and Brian and all the civil society partners who made it happen. I think it's a really excellent example of the civil society contribution to the Commonwealth values. So well done. We couldn't have done it without you. I know it's not as ambitious as you might have liked, but it's got us into a good place and we'll work on it. And then finally on the values, we've talked a little bit about the Commonwealth mechanisms and the programmes. So we really value the Secretary-General's Good Office's role, CMAG, and the electoral missions when they're operating at their best. And we do believe that it needs a bit of reform and needs strengthening, but they're certainly important pillars of that work and an area we want to keep on supporting. Now, all of this, or this ambition, wherever our priorities are, needs to be underpinned by finance and by reform initiatives. We need to make sure that the institutions are fit for the 21st century. And so our aim is to make those institutions, and particularly ComSec, more transparent, more focused, and ensure that they are delivering impact. And this is really essential to ensure funding on a sustainable footing. We know that contributions are dropping off, and until some of the fundamentals are addressed, and donors are happy, then that's not going to go up. And, we're a donor, and we have to decide whether do we give our money to the Commonwealth or the UN or civil society. They're difficult choices. We need to know that we want the Commonwealth to be the first choice for donors at a centre of excellence, and it's not there yet. But I think through the reform agenda, which includes funding, we have an opportunity here. And so, as I say, that's an ongoing bit of work, and we hope to sort of be delivering real impact and more transparency on that ahead of CHOGM in Samoa. And then finally, future of the Commonwealth, the big ideas. I'm going to offer some challenges, but not necessarily a UK position, because we don't have all the answers, and we're grappling with a lot of this ourselves, I've got to be honest. I think the question we often ask ourselves is, how can we sort of consolidate the Commonwealth place in the multilateral system? I think it's the third largest multilateral organisation, but it doesn't have the level of impact that you would expect from that and from its size. And what makes the Commonwealth unique, its diversity and the consensus decision-making, also means that sometimes it's not more than the sum of its parts. So, we are struggling with the decision-making, with some polarising views, and we've really seen that over climate and particularly over Ukraine. So if we want the Commonwealth to be a force for tackling global challenges, and that's a question, do we want that, or is it more of a forum? We do need to look at how we can change it. So, do we focus on a much narrower set of less controversial subjects? Do we try and move it beyond the forum? And I'm really interested, actually, somebody mentioned how the Francophonie work. I'm going to have a look at that, because they have a hybrid system, I think. So it's not just on consensus. Or should we focus within the Commonwealth on building regional and thematic groupings so that we can still move issues forward? So I put out lots of thoughts there without actually answering it, but sort of food for thought, I hope. And then we talked a lot about expansion. And how we should prioritise, if we should keep on expanding, and how we should prioritise. Now, in principle, the UK welcomes expansion. We think it's the sign of a dynamic and useful organisation, but I think there's a question about what the attributes are that we should focus on. We know it's not just historic links now. It's usually language, not always. We want it to focus on values. There's also something there as well about resilience and vulnerability. Are we better to bring certain countries into the Commonwealth fold and work with them, or do we leave them to other influences? Do we want a regional balance? As we've said, Africa now has 21 members. SIDS are also almost a majority. Small states are a majority. SIDS are almost a majority. What sort of balance do we want within the Commonwealth? And perhaps importantly, how are we going to fund all of this if the expansion is going to, if we're going to have more countries, how are we going to fund this when those resources are dwindling? So I do think, I think we are where you are, which is that we need to reflect on this. We need to take a strategic approach, not just consider every country on a case-by-case basis as they're put forward. And part of this is actually looking at the process. So we would like it to be more transparent, and I think we would like a perhaps more ongoing engagement through the process so that countries can push and test and challenge, rather than, at the moment, it's rather sort of a process and then members are given a choice, yes or no. And not every country wants to put up their hand, right? They have bilateral interests to consider. So I think there's a lot that could be done to improve that process and make sure that members are perhaps more firmly in the direction once they have those members who wish to join are in a slightly better position to do so. But I would say that our biggest challenge in the Commonwealth is relevance. We need this sort of powerful, compelling narrative on what we are and what we've done and what we're doing. And I do think that in addressing some of those challenges I've outlined and being really clear about the benefits of membership and the benefits to citizens and how it promotes links between peoples, we are getting ourselves into a stronger position to do that. Just to close, it's now 2 years, well, actually less than 2 years. We're looking at some point in autumn 24 until we get to CHOGM in Samoa. Delighted they're hosting it. It's going to be slightly logistically challenging. ComSec are going to have some real challenges there, as are we. But Samoa embodies the challenges of many Commonwealth countries. So, small island, they need economic resilience, they are climate vulnerable, and this will give them a powerful platform. They'll be able to showcase the best of the Pacific and what can be done to support SIDS. So once we're there, it's going to be really worth it. So thank you, Mark, and thank you for inviting me to the team here. Let's make sure we focus on the opportunities as well as the challenges. I myself am a passionate believer in the Commonwealth. I've seen it for myself firsthand in Rwanda and Namibia and how it can bring us together, but very clear-eyed about the challenges and the fact that we need to do better. Thank you.
Joel Cabazo is the founding partner of JK Associates, a London-based public affairs and communications consultancy. You've got the rest in front of you. Joel.
Thank you, Mark. Now, I think I'm under sort of strict instructions about time, and so I'll only sort of make a few remarks, and sort of strange coming from a politician to tell you about time and speaking, but there we are. Something about pots and kettles, but there we are. Forgive me. It was really good to sort of be here amongst sort of so many sort of friends, and thank you very much, Stuart, for sort of inviting me to make a few points here, which I will. First and foremost, I'd like to I start off by saying that I'm a child of the Commonwealth. And I say that because I think people like myself sort of embody the full body of the Commonwealth. And what do I mean by a child of the Commonwealth? I'm from Uganda. I was born in India, married to a Trinidadian. So I'm just trying to sort of see how I can get to the Australia bit and the Pacific bit, but I haven't found. So it could well be that I might just I'm trying to sort of organize it that a son-in-law or something like that might just appear on the scene at one point, and then at least I will have had the whole sort of Commonwealth spectrum. But until then, I'll be waiting patiently. I just wanted to sort of make a few points, as I said, because for time reasons. But if you look at the communique, and we're talking about the Commonwealth after Kigali, and you read sort of the first part of it, and it says, heads underscore the importance of connecting, innovating, and transforming in order to facilitate a full recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, achieve the 2030 agenda, and to respond to conflicts and crises in ways that increase resilience and progress in delivering a common future underpinned by sustainability, peace, and prosperity to improve the lives of all the people of the Commonwealth. That was from the communique at Kigali is actually how we say it, rather than Ki. As a Ugandan, I'll be fired if I don't say it in the right way. But those are words that could have been said at any time in the last 30 years. There was nothing new there. And so you wonder, as we go on to Samoa, I'd like to, you start asking yourself that, are we going to get a similar course of words? 3 points, three examples here. I found myself in Ahmedabad in India a few years ago, and India was hosting the African Development Bank, of which I was a director then. And so I asked an official, the Prime Minister was coming to address the meeting and stuff, so I said, well, you've invited the African Development Bank, you're hosting everything here, so well, what about the Commonwealth? And he says, oh, no, that's low priority as far as we're concerned here. But with Africa and the African Development Bank, we're prepared to put money into that. And they've been arguing for a seat at the table to be one of the directors, which, along with the UK, France, and all the others, because that is a real connection, and we want that business, and it's part of our strategy also against China, which they saw had given the African Development Bank $2 billion the year before. Now, that tells you that the biggest member of the Commonwealth, and one of the sort of oldest, if an official tells you that, I just thought, wow, that is something, you see. I was very happy that they were hosting us as the African Development, but what did it say about the Commonwealth from India? And for me, it was quite important because I was born in India because my parents went to study and lived in India for 10 years. And that's the reason I was there, because it was part of the Commonwealth. And my dad at the time, foolish young man as you are at that age, sort of said he would not go to Cambridge because it was a colonial country, because Uganda was still ruled by Britain. And he said, but India, that was different. Nehru was inviting Africans to go. And so you actually find a wave of leadership in Zambia, in Tanzania of leaders who went because of Nehru in the first wave of Africa's independence. Much of that is gone. It doesn't exist, and now they're looking to other ways. A second example I gave is that last year I was in, actually not last year, just a few months ago, I was in an African country which is a member of the Commonwealth, sort of reasonably big, and I said to the Permanent Secretary and Head of the Foreign Office, you know, where are your priorities in terms of the relationships that you have? And I said, and he listed, you know, the UN and all of that, Security Council, and we want to be on the Security Council and all of that. And then said, and Commonwealth? I said, yeah, it's nice to go to. But, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, these days, we don't really get much out of it. But we like to be at CHOGM, and we really, you know, it's nice meetings, as it were. The third example I'll give is that of Kigali, which you know, Joe has just been talking about. I was not at Kigali, but in the initial stages, I helped when I was asked to a few points, and I had organized many meetings in Rwanda, including with the African Development Bank. And I said, so what did you get out of it? You know, as I contacted people after CHOGM. And I had to write this down because it said, the officials said, all that democracy stuff, it was really about business for us. And becoming, and getting people, because Rwanda is trying to build itself up as a center for conferences. And, you know, and so it was all about getting people and to show Rwanda where we are as a meeting center. You know, and we accomplished that, just like we have with our name on Arsenal's shirts. You see? Now, the comparison for me was absolutely palpable and compelling, you know, when I heard that. So, of course, every country has its own agenda when they host CHOGM, but it was really telling. So as we speak about after Kigali, we have to then, you know, I mean, that was hardly a ringing endorsement. So as we head for Samoa, I want to pose the question, is it, you know, is the Commonwealth still viable? Is it something we still need? And I speak as somebody, as I said, a child of the Commonwealth, and having been an official of the Commonwealth Secretariat with Amitav, Sandy, and quite a number of people here. And, you know, so, or is it time as we head for Samoa to say to heads and ask them and say, look, what do you want from this institution? For start, is it, you know, and I mean, and if so, are you prepared to support it? We talk about the finances and we've skirted around them, but they're woeful. I remember when I was at the FDB and having been at the Secretariat of realizing that the budget in my own department, which was Communications and Public Affairs and External Relations, was bigger than that of several departments at the Secretariat, which I thought was an incredible thing, that this one department of something in Africa could be bigger than the whole sort of Secretariat. And so, and when you think about it, one or two limousines of those leaders, in terms of contributions, could actually, you know, have made a significant contribution. I know because some of those limousines, you know, will be about £200,000, you know. Now, get one or two, and you should be fine. So, my question is that there have been attempts at reform. Dr. Sue Onslow sort of talked to us about it, and so did many people yesterday, you see. And we do have to ask ourselves, is it viable? Do we need it? Would it be missed? Now, I say that, and so it's time to face that kind of question as we go into Samoa. We talk about the youth, you see, and youth engagement and great postcards. The truth is, the youth don't care. You see, ask young people around the Commonwealth, And I'm in, I at least once a month I'm on I'm somewhere in sort of within the Commonwealth. They don't care. And so for all our wonderful youth programs, and this is not, as people say, a communication problem. It's only a communication problem when you don't have anything substantive to say, you see. Amitav spoke just before the break and talked about, the time when some of us were within the Secretariat. And it's not about saying that, because we were there at that time, that was the greatest period. No, I wouldn't. I would have loved to have been there during the apartheid days, because I actually think that would have been a much more exciting time. But there were real programs where there was significance. And I think Richard Bourne also referred to some of those times and thinking, so where is it? So I think we should stop pretending. And, when you have the Secretary General came and talked to us yesterday about the wonderful things that the Commonwealth has done. And of course, many people had said, but who knows that? And if nobody knows it, what's the value of it? Even the countries don't appreciate it because they don't know about it. And yet, she's talking in this echo chamber because we're all here because we do value and have some connection with the Commonwealth. But it's an echo chamber that actually outside doesn't really matter and nobody really cares. So in 2023, is this an institution that is fit for business? Is it, or should we be putting it out of its misery and say, right, it had its time. And as we talk about expansion, Gabon, Togo, I worked in an institution that was half Francophone, half Anglophone. Trust me, their systems are very, very different. And their joining the Commonwealth is almost absolutely of inconsequential significance to them and to their populations, you see, because that's not where they are. So just to sort of round up, do we want the Commonwealth? And if so, why not at Samoa put it to the leaders and say, look, it's about time. If you want it, you're going to back it, and what should it be doing? 2 caveats. The civil society and people institutions, I think, should be in some way, we could find a way as to how those continue, because those people relationships are very crucial, and the bodies outside the official Commonwealth, if I can put it like that. Secondly, the environment and the sort of the oceans program. Some of these are critical, especially to the small states who would have nobody else championing their causes, and actually where the Commonwealth was actually, in terms of the environment, way ahead of many institutions in the late 90s, in the late 80s and early 90s. And so maybe we could see, but maybe we should just ask, should we be having them in a different form? So I believe that after Kigali, it's time to ask ourselves the hard questions and not just sort of prattle about and just say, look, do we need this? Should we be having it? And so, and then see if we do. My daughter is an undergraduate in history and politics. And when she asked me where I was going yesterday, when she had called the night before and said, where are you going? And I told her, and her response was, oh God, does that thing still exist? Isn't that what you worked for a long time ago? And she said, well, what is it for? And she's just turned 21, a daughter of somebody from Uganda, Trinidad, and spends her time, a lot of time, in Africa. So therein lies the challenge after Kigali.
I'm now going to move from the groundbreaker to Helen Jones, who has, like some of us, wears a variety of hats. She's policy and advisor at Commonwealth at its A Penalty Campaign, advisor on the Education and Skills Commonwealth Business Women's Network, and communications secretary for the Commonwealth Consortium for Education, which is great because I'm the alternate chair and I'm wanting to move on soon. Helen.
Thank you so much to the Roundtable for the invitation to speak. So I'm going to look at the Commonwealth as a people's association, and particularly youth, and the third pillar in this session, and the challenges of trying to be more effective. And this is based on my many years of work in youth engagement, specifically in the Commonwealth, and also my engagement with various Commonwealth-accredited organisations. So, youth. So, Article 13 of the Charter focuses specifically on young people. And it states that young people are critical to the future success of the Commonwealth. So we need to unpack how is the Commonwealth engaging, what are some of the issues. But first of all, I think we just need to take stock of what the situation is for young people at the moment globally. We've got the largest generation of youth in history, and they're transitioning to adulthood. That's 1.8 billion young people. And of course, how they navigate this transition is going to be absolutely critical, not only to their lives, but to the future of the world. But that transition is getting an awful lot harder. And frankly, is it fun to be young anymore? Some of the younger people might have some observation on that, because there are huge issues. That's partly because of that biggest population in history. But also we're dealing with the COVID crisis. That has affected young people really very dramatically. A lot of young people now lost education, all sorts of opportunities. And even before COVID, there was significant issues about youth unemployment, a real challenge for governments, very, very, very worried about the lack of employment opportunities and also the decent jobs agenda. And that's got worse. And the pandemic has particularly affected girls and young women, with increases in child marriage, FGM, violence, and rising poverty. So the Commonwealth itself, contextually, that is facing all those challenges for its young citizens, and those young citizens are expecting the Commonwealth to respond if they know about the Commonwealth and they're bothered about the Commonwealth, which is another matter. And the key agenda for young people is Action 2030. So if you were 15, that really was important for young people, the 15 to 30 years, this current cohort of young people. And we're missing those SDGs now by a long, long way. Very deeply concerning. So youth populations continue to increase. We've been at the youth bulge for the last 10 years. Africa, I think, Joel, is still very much in that youth bulge situation. And this concerns governments about how on earth do they respond to these issues and the post-COVID situation. And there are concerns about, obviously, the social contract and young people having faith in democratic processes and those democratic processes being able to deliver real change that will improve their situation. Now, what's been interesting is that actually many Commonwealth governments want a more human development focus. I think that was coming through quite strongly in Kigali for the Commonwealth, and frankly less focus on civil and political rights. Now, actually, they're not mutually exclusive, of course they're not, but there have been tensions. Those of us involved very closely in the education world know about the tensions there have been, for example, in terms of budgets and what the Commonwealth will do with education and health divisions in the Secretariat reduced at one stage to one advisor, and really only managing to convene ministerials. So that tension is very much there, but most Commonwealth countries want the Commonwealth to deliver on the human development agenda, I think. Now, just to say, as an aside, this year is going to be the Commonwealth Year of Youth. That was agreed by heads of government. I don't know how many of you are aware of that yet. Information will be coming out. This does provide us all with an opportunity to put focus on young people. And one of the objectives is to do some movement, create a greater movement for youth. But of course, the prime objective there is to increase investment in young people, available for young people. Now, one of the challenges that countries have, and of course the Commonwealth has been youth participation and voice. But this has been an area of quite considerable Commonwealth success. And there has been quite a lot of institutional development now, and I've had some involvement in that way back in 1997 when we started the Commonwealth Youth Forum, and that has continued. And that also provided actually a very interesting partnership model between the official Commonwealth and the unofficial Commonwealth with a civil society organisation, the Commonwealth Youth Exchange Council, in partnership with the Commonwealth Secretariat and the host government and young people in terms of delivering that. So getting youth voice, getting a seat at the table has moved on. There's dialogue with heads. You do wonder, is that really primarily about a photo opportunity? It's very good for heads to be there with young people. The challenge, though, now, and this was highlighted yesterday, is for young people to have an actual say in policy. Young people are really action-orientated and solution-orientated, and understandably, they're impatient for change. And I think one of the problems for the Commonwealth is it does move very, very slowly, although so do other intergovernmental organisations. I think Pierre Trudeau at CHOGM, he said to young people, we don't need you to be the leaders of tomorrow, we need you to be the leaders of today. You should be directly contributing to the policies and positions of the Commonwealth. That is improving, but there's still a lot to go, a long way to go.
Correction, it was Justin Trudeau.
Oh, sorry, yes. Oh dear. Showing my age there. And one of the issues, in terms of young people's views about the Commonwealth, they just don't know very much about it as well. There's a very small cohort, elite cohort, that gets touched by the Commonwealth, whether it's by scholarships or indeed via the Commonwealth Youth Forum and the youth structures, that is through youth councils and the Commonwealth Youth Council. And we do have significant communication problems, and there's been lots and lots of calls for greater education about young people, about the Commonwealth for young people, and that's still a huge gap. So countries are members of the Commonwealth, but they don't educate their populations about the Commonwealth. So there's a real challenge of renewing the Commonwealth and making it relevant, more relevant for young people. So this bridges into then the third pillar, our sector, if you like, and our responsibilities. I think the challenge of youth engagement is also a huge challenge for the accredited organisations. And if they're going to survive and thrive rather than wither, there needs to be a lot more engagement between young people in the Commonwealth and the accredited organisations. Now, so I've been in this business for a very, very long time. I've invested in young people, capacity built loads and loads of young people. The curious thing is, and by the way, the definition of youth in the Commonwealth is 15 to 29. The curious thing is that those young people that do have contact with the Commonwealth are part of some of its programmes and have opportunities for voice. When they reach 29, they exit out. They drop off the cliff because they're no longer youth. But what's our responsibility, those of us that are involved in accredited organisations? What are we doing to actually open the door and invite some of those young people who have already know about the Commonwealth invite them in and to be part of our own renewal. I think we're in deep, deep danger of not being sustainable because we're not addressing the renewal of our own organisations. And quite a lot of organisations are folding, Commonwealth organisations are folding, although others are coming on stream. And I think the more successful Commonwealth accredited organisations now will be those that are very much thematically based, because young people want to do action around areas of work, of the SDG agenda, for example. The more successful organisations are embracing both the themes and for action and also asking young people in and finding roles for them. And I'm thinking some of the young people that we've invested in are actually now in very, very high level positions. We've got ministers, people running organisations, came through the Commonwealth Youth Programme. But this is another issue. We don't track. We don't know where they are. We lose track. And in the more recent programme that's of interest is the Queen's Young Leaders. There was the hope for a legacy from that. They're out there, but there aren't many ways of actually continuing to engage those Queen's Young Leaders. Coming to the issues for accredited organisations themselves, I mean, one of the issues is, what is the point of accreditation? Why do we bother? What's the point of signing up? I think increasing organisations are actually posing that question. Is there any point? What do we get out of it? So I think that's a big issue for the Commonwealth to look at. And there are concerns that partnership working isn't working all that well. It's incredibly hard to navigate the Commonwealth Secretariat. I've had numerous conversations with newly accredited organisations who are all at sea, do not know how to actually work the Commonwealth, be effective, how to get into its spaces. I mean, what I find really is quite staggering is, in my memory, the new strategic plan, I don't believe we were, as accredited organisations, consulted about that, although there was a whole partnership section. Well, I don't think we were adequately consulted, but perhaps you can put me right or wrong on that. And that's really quite staggering, that the 80-plus organisations aren't playing an effective role. At the moment, I'm on the project advisory group for the study of accredited organisations, and it's had its moments, as some of you on that committee will know. But the point of that study, well, we found out one of the points of that study is for member governments, to enable member governments to know more about the accredited organisations. And so again, not only is there a communication problem between young people, structures and accredited organisations, but there's a problem between accredited organisations and member governments. Member governments not understanding that they exist, what they do, and therefore, of course, what their needs are. So that might be something that you'll want to pick up a bit more. So I think looking ahead, one of the challenges for us is to define, as accredited organisations, is to define more clearly what we think our role, but also to continue to push the boundaries. We have to push the boundaries. And there's been some good work on this. You've referred to the media principles. I've been involved over the last 10 years in policy work on tackling the issue of child marriage in the Commonwealth. I was also very involved in the Equality and Justice Alliance programme, which was looking at women's rights and LGBT rights in the Commonwealth. And actually, I do think that programme, which the FCDO funded considerably, has given rise to a lot of the groundwork that is now being capitalised. But we are chronically under-resourced. So this comes back then to what does partnership look like? I know the Commonwealth, ComSec is chronically under-resourced, but we do need perhaps to move to some sort of commissioning contracting model that enables the Commonwealth accredited organisations themselves to get some resourcing and to better capacity build themselves. And generally, I think there's a problem of vision. I don't think we as accredited organisations are really grasping the nettle sufficiently in terms of visioning the future. I think this conference has been an excellent start to that. But there's a whole question of Commonwealth futures. You know, what is the future of the Commonwealth? Mark, I will stop there. Thank you.
Now, short questions, please. I'm going to do bunches of 3 or 4. You will know if the questions have been too long when I only call 3. I'd like to try and get 4 in. I see Carl Wright.
Thanks, Mark. And is this working? Yeah, anyway, indeed. Very much endorse what Joe has said, that the Commonwealth needs to focus in its future work. And I think certainly the 3 areas, values, climate and trade investment, are key issues. And I think a lot of the work has to concentrate on that. But I think at the same time, the issue which Baroness Prashad raised about membership is important. I don't think it's valuable to bring in members like Zimbabwe at the present time, given human rights concerns in countries like that. And indeed, should we actually be thinking, this is a thought, of suspending existing members, frankly, unless there's something happening in the good offices I don't know about, having a country like Brunei, which has absolutely no form of democracy, national, regional or local, and has Sharia law, frankly, I don't see how a country like that meets any Commonwealth standards. So what is it doing in the Commonwealth in terms of the Charter? So should we be suspending Commonwealth countries to be more effective? And finally, yes, promoting global values. And by talking about Zimbabwe, I'm talking about an organisation, the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, which I was involved with, which has maintained its presence in Zimbabwe through programme work, funded by the EU and others for the last 20 years, and still have an office of 3 people there doing lots of good work. So not having membership doesn't necessarily mean not engaging, and I very much endorse also what Kieran said earlier about addressing some of the real global challenges like China and Russia, and that the Commonwealth can use its values in countries and regions outside the actual membership, including places like Zimbabwe, maybe Hong Kong and elsewhere, which you heard about this morning. Thank you.
I've seen a number of hands up, but I believe in diversity, and I haven't seen a lady. Kieran.
Thank you. This is a fantastic panel. I have a question to both Joel and Helen. What do you think are the attractive topics to engage youth? How do we coin the Commonwealth? I mean, I've been grappling with this question myself, looking at, why is Commonwealth not really the brand name for youth if we are going to be coming up with a communication strategy to brand or rebrand Commonwealth. What are the areas where both of you think that we can engage youth, and what are the tools? I mean, to my understanding, I think the role of social media is critical in actually reaching out. Your comments on this, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicholas Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I think future challenges, one of the challenges is to the Independent Forum of Commonwealth Organisations and how we reorganise and regroup for the future. But we are faced at the moment with needing to respond to a report on the collective contribution of Commonwealth organisations to the Commonwealth Association. We put together a project advisory group, which I was asked to coordinate, but it wasn't consulted on methodology, sampling or anything else. We've got a second and final report, which we can comment on and put text in by Monday next at midday. And Helen has very helpfully outlined some of the issues, for example, around definition of what partnership means and lack of consultation with the third sector. It seems that this, to me, this project has been an exercise in marginalising the third sector. So I think if we're looking for bottom-up approaches, then the IFCO could help. And I think I'll leave it there in the interest of brevity, but if anybody would like to talk to me over lunch, I'd be very happy to feed back on what you might be able to do by Monday to shift the course of this tanker, as it were.
Yes, we've got time for a fourth one, and I'm going to ask Amitav.
Thank you so much, Chair, and again, thank you to the panelists for wonderful presentations, and Joel in particular for what I thought was both profound and provocative. I have two questions about two Commonwealth institutions that are important, given that this session is about the future of the Commonwealth, and both of them could be slightly awkward. One is about the head of the Commonwealth, and one is about the chair in office. We have, for the second time in the history of the modern Commonwealth, smooth transition from one head of the Commonwealth to another. But the 2018 achievement at CHOGM that transition could be seamless may not be replicated very easily again, especially given what is currently going on with the royal family. So what does the panel think about the position of the head of the Commonwealth, the importance of it? Is it something that you see continuing without difficulty in the future? The second is about the chair in office, which at one time was touted as the answer to the day when there might not be a head of the Commonwealth. But the chair in office has been varied in his or her influence, and we currently have Rwanda as the chair in office. The president of Rwanda is a person with high profile, but of course is also not without controversy. And we will soon have the Samoan Prime Minister as chair in office, who is a very wonderful lady and very capable, no doubt, but the head of a government of a small state which does not have a lot of support around her in terms of its intrinsic civil service. So does the panel think that the chair in office is an institution that has worked, and could it work better? Thank you.
I'm going to go in a different order. Joel, perhaps you'd like to be the first to answer. If you have an answer, if not, you can pass it on.
What, on the chair in office role, is that? Or, yes. Okay. I think we have indeed had a smooth transition in terms of the head of the Commonwealth, sort of moving on to the current head, who's now the King Charles. However, part of this also goes to the points I was making, that these are some of the things that need to be discussed. If, why should it be a member of the British royal family? 70, 75 years after, why should it be? If I can be controversial for a moment, does it have to be a white Brit who sits there in this position of being the head of the Commonwealth? When the majority isn't. You see, why should it be? We've had Secretary Generals from all around the Commonwealth, so why can't the head of the Commonwealth be from any other country? And so we have, as part of the question of, is it relevant? You also then have this whole thing about, well, why should it be a member of the royal family? And what does it mean in many countries that are republics? They don't even have monarchies of any sort at all. So as part of the discussion that must have happened, the issue of the head of the Commonwealth and who comes after, it shouldn't be automatic that it will be King William, because then, this is also going to cause people going to further and further away from this institution. If we're saying the United Kingdom is an equal partner to Samoa, to Uganda, to Trinidad, Jamaica, then surely in all these institutions, you do need to show that. Not that the head must only be from one particular country, one particular institution, one particular family, and then everything else follows. Then that doesn't make sense. And of course, then that means, again, it means the validity of the Commonwealth. Quickly, on chair in office, I think the point you make about a small country. And the chair in office was supposed to be a practical thing. And we've seen it in the past when there have been big issues. We talked about CMAG earlier on, where the chair in office could have that pull. Beyond the Secretary General's good offices, you could also have the chair in office pulling and making sure that that happens. That's going to be very difficult with a country such as Samoa. How are you going to talk to a Pakistan or a Nigeria or whatever? So actually, it's becoming less and less relevant. And actually, it will not be able, it can't be sustained. And then there was the question of Kiran asked about youth. And can I first say that everybody talks about this whole thing about communications, we need better communications and whatnot. I think I know a little bit about communications, and having worked in it in some form or the other as a journalist, broadcaster, and then a communications director for several institutions. It's not about communications, it's the fundamental. In other words, what is it that you must communicate or you want to communicate? So if we're talking about the youth, what is it? What is the program you have for young people? When my 21-year-old daughter says, oh God, does that still exist? Given her background, then that's not just a communication problem. That means that there's nothing in it for her as she sees it, and as she looks across the world and her perspectives of the world. And this goes for her relatives in Uganda, goes for her age mates in Trinidad and Tobago, and it goes right across the world. So it's about the programs. What is it? Mark talked about the Chevening scholars, and all those guys. Now, if you were to sort of revive programs where they can see something, that there's something in it for me as a youth, and the reason to engage, and Helen then also talked about falling off at 29, then there is every reason to become engaged with the Commonwealth. But at the moment, there isn't any reason to be involved with the Commonwealth. And for all the communications you may want, this is not a communication issue. This is a fundamental issue. When Helen talks about one officer of the youth program at one point, that just tells you that this is not a serious organization and this subject isn't being taken seriously.
I'm going to stop you there because we are eating up time.
Sure.
I'm going to ask colleagues if they could go to no more than 3 minutes. Helen, would you?
Would you like me to go? Yes, so picking that up, attractive topics to engage youth with. I mean, young people are self-identifying those to a large extent. The SDG agenda is an excellent framework because it also allows a lot of action orientation. I mean, the key thing now is that young people are very much, it's about youth-led development. So young people aren't waiting, they're doing. But they want to skill themselves up. So programs that offer skilling up are absolutely essential. And obviously they're wanting to build careers, successful careers. Campaigning, a lot of young people are very, very interested in campaigning. Climate change, obvious, which is, and we've had that laid out constantly, I think, over this last 24 hours. What I should say is that the young people have organised, in the Commonwealth, young people have organised themselves into networks. I think there are now 11 networks. How many of us actually know about those and have links with them? Those networks coalesce around thematic areas. Disability, gender's big. Gender's very big as well. Climate change, human rights, young entrepreneurs. The networks are there, but we're not linking up with them. So that's like young people. So young people are always looking for face-to-face opportunities. This is a problem. It's expensive, but face-to-face mobility, youth exchanges, international scholarships. That's what a lot of young people like. In terms of head of the Commonwealth, I mean, Prince Charles. He obviously did a very long apprenticeship. And he did a lot of Commonwealth work. I mean, I was involved over the years with Prince's Trust and all sorts. In fact, the Commonwealth Youth Forum, it needed Prince Charles also to be involved through the Prince's Trust. So long Commonwealth apprenticeship. Whether Prince William is going to get that apprenticeship, of course, I mean, William's been very careful what he says about this. I will touch on Harry quickly. Harry became the Commonwealth Youth Ambassador. Personally, I was very surprised by this because the Commonwealth has its own elected chair of the Commonwealth Youth Council, who is de facto the Commonwealth Youth Ambassador. But there was a good, actually there was quite a good response from young people at the time. This is back at 2018, because he was young. I mean, we've moved on quite a lot, and now Carrie isn't that Commonwealth Youth Ambassador. But we do need some sort of a ambassadorial, some mechanism of raising the profile of the Commonwealth. I'll stop there.
Just saying that the current Prince of Wales, has said publicly that he does not assume that he's taking on the role of the head of the Commonwealth. I agree very much with Joel. That needs a conversation amongst all Commonwealth members as to what they want. It may be him, it may be not. I think the challenge then is, if not the reigning monarch, who else? Because I don't want to go through another selection process like we have for the Secretary-General. That's difficult enough. So, there is a question, do we need the head? But I'll leave that there because I wanted to be clear that the royal family themselves are not assuming that he will take on that role. As for chair in office, we've had a tough time actually over the last 4 years. So very much agree that it's going to be difficult for a country like Samoa. I think it's an important role. You have to have somebody who can work with a secretariat, who can lead, who can pull together, deal with some difficult questions. I think the role could be defined a bit better. When we went to look at it, it's very nebulous, very unclear. We actually had some disagreements with what actually involved. So I would say we could have, we should really define that role more clearly. On other issues, on Zimbabwe, I think we look forward to the day we can welcome Zimbabwe back into the Commonwealth fold because it's progressed substantively its economic and political reform, and we're not there yet. The government's clear on that, but it'll be a great day when they are able to prove that they have made that sort of progress. We won't expect them to be perfect, because many Commonwealth countries are far from perfect, but we certainly expect to see further progress on that. In terms of engaging youth, I think my understanding on this is more as what they want is a lot of it's around education and the skills and the jobs. There is a role there for the Commonwealth, whether it's scholarships or the trade or the investment I was talking about. But really we need to hear from youth. I mean, I'm very struck by the fact that the attendance here is perhaps above the average age by some way, and I include myself in that, but that forms part of our thinking. And then on Nick, on the accredited organisations, I haven't been able to read the report yet. I know there's some unhappiness about it and the way that it's been carried out, and I look forward to hearing a bit more. Perhaps this should be part of the reform agenda, this relationship. So, feel free to send us some thoughts. It's an open, ongoing agenda. So if you think it's not working for you, why don't you put it forward? I think I covered everything.
Richard Bourne.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, it's the issue of the chair of the Commonwealth. You've been High Commissioner in Rwanda. And my question is, what will Rwanda do during its period? It's not going to spend $500 million in the way of the UK government. It doesn't have the 4 years of time. However, will it be pushing or thwarting the so-called reform agenda? Will it be wanting more money for the Secretariat? Will it be pushing its own business interests? Will it be playing a role in the selection of, we now expect, an African Secretary-General to succeed Patricia Scotland? So please, with all your insight, give us some sense of direction over the next couple of years from the new chair in office.
Baroness Bouchard.
Thank you. I want to pick up the point that Joel made quite rightly in terms of asking the future of the Commonwealth, is it actually needed? And the points, Joe, that you made about the reform agenda. I do think that the concept of the Commonwealth is right. It's the execution where I think we need to focus on. And there is some urgency now, given all the challenges that we've talked about. And I was encouraged, Joe, when you listed the areas where you're looking at reform. But my question really is, that I posed earlier, is that in the next 18 months before next CHOGM, are we going to kind of formulate the questions which need to be actually addressed at the next CHOGM, which is about the reform? Because all the questions coming from the floor about the head of the Commonwealth, the chair in office, youth engagement, how you work with non-governmental organisations, how you make it relevant, I think need to be discussed. So I think the time has come for a pretty comprehensive and a radical look to see whether the way it was constituted in terms of execution works. Because I do remain of the view that the concept of the Commonwealth is right. It's the execution and the reform. It worked in the past, but what are the changes? And I was encouraged that, Joe, you questioned in terms of looking at regional offices, you know, I mean, a pretty radical look. I mean, some years ago I did suggest that we might think in terms of having regional offices in the context of the Charter. So I would just like to pose that. I think the urgency of what we need to do in the next 18 months.
Arif.
Well, I mean, I think with respect, Joel, I think the communications issue is there. If you look at how, I mean, just one fact I'll just put out there. Commonwealth Games mounted an esports tournament, the Commonwealth esports tournament. More people watched that than watched the entire Commonwealth Games, apart from the opening ceremony. So the point here is there are new ways to communicate, whether it's through, you know, the space around emerging technologies or podcasting or video gaming, or whatever it is. And I don't see any action, much action in that space from accredited organizations. I see little bits, you know, from ComSec. But I think we need to really think about very differently how people are consuming information now and how effective the Commonwealth family is. Not so much the member governments, but particularly accredited organizations and the Commonwealth Secretariat in doing that. And I'm not talking about social media, which is putting out, you know, the Secretary General's speeches. It's got to be more than that.
Thank you.
And a point on that, I mean, Instagram, global Instagram, TikTok stars. I mean, that's the consumption of anybody who's from 19 years old to 30 years old. So I would actually say that, you know, these are the kind of platforms where youth can be engaged. It's not the content, and it's probably not the kind of like face-to-face, but as I mentioned in my kind of presentation, that Welsh youth are actually they've stopped applying for jobs. And they've actually tried to really focus more time on TikTok. And TikTok is owned by this Chinese tech company. Now, the thing is that Instagram is massive platform for youth engagement at the moment. And then it could be just all those kind of topics which are actually which are going to be interested for youth in Canada, as well as in Sri Lanka, as well as in Samoa. I mean, this is a massive tool of convergence. And why shouldn't it be used for maximizing the Commonwealth engagement?
Thank you. Helen.
Yes, on that, in fairness to the Commonwealth Youth Programme, Youth Affairs Division, is using all those channels. We may not see it, but actually there is the specific communication strategy with young people. I think I don't know how young people necessarily find that, the TikTok pages and the Facebook and that. I mean, I'm sure they do, but there's a lot going on in fairness. It's a question then of building the audience, keeping the audience. Just going back to the regional offices, I remind you that the Commonwealth Youth Programme was at one stage the only bit of the Commonwealth Secretariat that was devolved. And all those offices were closed down. That was the major opportunity to build on those offices and for the Commonwealth to begin to decentralise. I know the Commonwealth Foundation did look at whether it could piggyback and join those offices, but that didn't happen, probably for internal political reasons as well, maybe resourcing. We lost a major opportunity to have a non-London stronger presence. Joel may know more about that. Thank you.
Did you want to come in then?
Sorry. Joel. Yes, I mean, I have to say that I agree about the offices, and as somebody who sort of went around all of them, you know, that was a missed opportunity, because that could have then been a base on which to build, you know, in terms of engagement. And, you know, but we are where we are. And so that to that extent, when Kieran talks about social media, yes, I agree, but remember, it's still a tool. You see, you still need content. You see, and that for me is what I'm talking about. That you still need content, even if you're going to be on Instagram, even if you're going to do TikTok. There must be now. TikTok, fine, you could just dance, but is it a Commonwealth tune? Is it done by a Commonwealth artist? Is it, so I'm saying that, is it done, for instance, in Urdu? Is it done in a culturally sort of appreciation? So what I'm saying is that I agree, but that those are tools, but they need to be used in the context of content that you then deliver to the youth. Question, I'm just going on these backwards. Commonwealth Games. We just heard from here, people coming in. The amazing thing about the Commonwealth Games is that overall, people don't associate it with the Commonwealth. You see? And that's the tragedy of it. So it's seen as the Commonwealth Games, but they're not actually the fact that it started, as the Empire Games and blah, 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 and that actually it is part and parcel of the Commonwealth family, but it's one of those organizations. So that link, if you're going to do anything, and as you say, you rightly say, because people watch sports, people are engaged, you've got the young people, then perhaps that's the way, but you need to then make that connection, which at the moment, including in the Secretariat, if I may say, isn't being made to the same extent, to say those games exist because there is a Commonwealth. So it's those linkages. Baroness Prussia said the concept is right, execution is the issue in terms of the Commonwealth. Yesterday, Dr. Sue Onslow told us that, there was a sentence that sort of resonated in my mind all night, is that there is no appetite for reform, you see? And until there is appetite for reform, that's why I actually went to the extreme of saying, what is this thing for? Why don't we just blow it up? You see? And maybe if we take it to that, people might say, well, hold on. Actually, we do want this, or these are the bits we want, these are the bits that resonate with us, whether it's education, whether it's agenda, whatever. And then we might actually get a Commonwealth that is fit for the 21st century. Yes, so, but otherwise, there is, as Sue said, there is no appetite for change. And with that, the decline is going to continue. And in 10 years' time, I'm almost certain there'll be almost nothing.
Our chair is...
There was a head and chair.
No, I've got a couple to Rwanda as well.
Sorry, we've got time because
Did you
Victoria
want to answer?
said we can go
I didn't
for
answer
that.
those two questions.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Sorry,
one more.
I think Joel and I confused
Just before
you.
we start, could I say that in the final round, I'm looking for people who haven't contributed before. So I have a blank speakers list at the moment.
Sure.
Great, thank you. So on Rwanda, I'm reluctant to speak for them. They can do that. But my understanding is they are very keen to deliver tangible benefits. And at Submerged, I'll say this is what we did. Of course, there are challenges around that, including funding. They have a particular focus on trade and jobs, but also on reform. And part of their job as chair in office actually is to make sure that those reforms agreed in CHOGM are embedded ahead of Samoa. And I got the impression actually that people didn't understand there are new rules agreed for selection of the SG, which are that people put forward their manifesto, that everyone has to put forward, has to be put forward or put themselves forward 6 months in advance of CHOGM. You can't put yourself forward after that. There's no smoke and daggers in the room with leaders. So it's a lot more transparent. Not saying it's going to be perfect, but a big improvement. So we'll see how that goes. But they will be responsible for ensuring those reforms are embedded. It'll be the Samoan Prime Minister who is in the room actually making it work on the day as host. On reform, I actually disagree. I think there is an appetite for reform. Well, the UK's got an appetite for reform. But what I would say is that
Good.
Let's be realistic here. We're not looking at a big bang. I mean, you know, the UK's got lots of... We'd like to do something big bang, but this is, you know, 56 equal countries. It was painful going through the last reform, and that was fairly modest. So let's not think that this is going to change everything. And whatever we come up with, it won't be perfect. And we need to be careful we don't put all our focus in reform and actually not focus on the benefits and the deliverables, because we'll never get anything perfect. So it's that balance of, you know, ongoing work to make an institution better and being able to deliver at the same time.
Final round, Oren.
Thank you. My name is Oren Grunbaum. I'm a journalist at The Guardian and write for the Roundtable. I think the enormous elephant in the room is climate. And with respect to Joe's points about trade and values, there's not, I don't think, much point. There is nothing for trade and values if your country is disappearing. And I think even if we stop, you know, emitting any carbon dioxide over the sea levels will continue to rise. Now, by my reckoning, there are about 23 member states which are acutely vulnerable. I think the first country to disappear will definitely be one of the Commonwealth states. There are islands in the Pacific which are 1 meter above sea level, and they're becoming unviable. We've seen that with the Tokyo, the Japan biodiversity targets, not a single one being met over 10 years. We've seen that, you know, for all the talk about climate and biodiversity, we do keep, as collectively, keep kicking the can down the road. So looking ahead, I see a role for the Commonwealth as being brokering, and I would like the comments of the panel, brokering the undoubted huge numbers of climate refugees that will be an issue. Looking ahead 20 years, 30 years ahead, which may be, and with respect, you know, don't want to insult everybody here, but the young people, climate is the issue, you know, and in a way that maybe it isn't for people of our age. And so what the thing is that a lot of these islands that are going to disappear, they have vast maritime territories, and they have rights over those in law. They haven't been established, whether you can use those laws, those rights, as leverage to allow other people other countries to resettle those people. But I would see a key role for the Commonwealth could be in brokering those sort of agreements, and I'd like to hear what you all have to say about that.
I see a hand, yes.
Hi, John Elliott. I'm a journalist, many years in India, and here as a member of the Roundtable Board, rather than as an active journalist, I guess. Having listened to all this for the last, since yesterday afternoon, it seems to me that the Commonwealth has got 3 main areas of operation. One is sustaining the monarchy in power, which we heard about from Sue last night, giving them more to look after than just the ununited kingdom. The second one is doing the great work, which Nick described yesterday, on climate change and things like that. And the third is on values, which seems to me to be the weakest. You do sustain the king now in power. You may not sustain William, but you'll give him places to visit while he's still the Prince of Wales. You do good work in some areas of advising and helping, like Nick talked about yesterday. But on values, do you really achieve anything? And if so, where and when? And that leads me on to my current point, which is many of you may know that there's a BBC programme over the last 2 nights, a 2-part series on India and Muslims and Modi, unwisely, if not headlined, at least billed as being Modi and the Muslims, which is not exactly the way to get support in India. And I'm sure the Commonwealth, when they tried to persuade Mr. Modi to behave better, would do it more tactfully behind closed doors. But if India is not going to listen to the values of the Commonwealth, what chance of any other country ever doing so?
Anybody else who hasn't been able to make a contribution, who would like to make a contribution?
Yeah.
Then, because time is up, I think we'll...
Yes, round up. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry.
Well, if there's time, it's quite a succinct one.
Succinct one, please, William. Thank you.
Following up from what John said, perhaps, Joe, you could tell us something about the significance of the national human rights institutions' work across the Commonwealth. There was a small mention in the UK's FCDO annual report. Overall, it didn't really light up the Commonwealth, that page, to my mind. And it mentioned the media principles, but it seems to me that is the kind of forum where the Commonwealth could show that its values mean something and help individual countries to make that happen. And that connects with the SDGs and all the other work, the monitoring work. Thank you.
Thank you. On that last point, I agree. We do think there's work to be done there on strengthening those institutions. I'm not an expert on this, and also I know we're having an ongoing conversation, but happy to take that forward with you or with my people who know a bit more, but I absolutely agree with you on that. And on climate, yes, absolutely, this is important to the Commonwealth. We have to be realistic. You know, we're not going to solve climate change challenges through the Commonwealth. There are other bodies, such as COP, that are going to do that. But the niche for the Commonwealth, where it's, for example, giving a voice to SIDS, helping support access finance, that sort of thing, there is definitely a role for the Commonwealth which will contribute to the sort of the greater climate change dialogue, I think, is where I see the value add.
Sure. Starting with the question on sort of the value of the 28 countries that might be sinking and the effects of that. You know, we talked about communications, and it's some form or the other over the last 2 days has come out. If you look back, 80s into the 90s in the Commonwealth, it was apartheid. And then increasingly, as that was a single big issue, you then moved on to good governance. And hence, institutions like CMAG, which we were now told are no longer really the shadow of what they used to be. And so here is an issue, the environment. It is one that I really do believe the Secretariat has a great opportunity and actually does well. So it could well be that that is the tool to which you use to communicate, to reach and show the difference you're making to these countries. And of course, if no difference is made, what could happen with the climate refugees and and so forth. So for me, that is an obvious choice, a target that could be used. It would get, you're a Guardian journalist. I mean, that would immediately interest your paper and the others into coming back into sort of reporting the Commonwealth and on a lot of other things. You then could spread them to the others. On India and Mr. Elliott, where you said, you talked about the values, and then, of course, if you're not engaging India, I completely agree. Unless you start engaging India, a country such as India, its size, its power, so it's the person who said to me, that's of low value, when they talked about the Commonwealth, it said where it is. But you're absolutely right, because who knows, even by engaging it, we might even change some of the practices of Prime Minister Modi and the way, he operates. He's a hero, of course, in Ahmedabad and his state, but I'm saying that, you might just have some effect there. So all I'm saying is that some way you need to engage India. It's a sleeping giant, and unless you do, and especially with the youth, the amount of young people there, and the entrepreneurship, and a lot of other things, you do need that.
And finally, Helen.
So not much more to add, really. I mean, in terms of migration, I mean, it's happening now. Young people on the move now, if they can. And that can only increase. So, I mean, this is a major issue that the Commonwealth is going to have to own now. Because it's already started, and we've had some dreadful climatic tragedies just this year. So it's starting. It's with us. And as I've said, the young elites will be the first to go, and that will create the brain drain. And then we get smaller states that are getting increasingly unsustainable, leaving older populations behind, more vulnerable populations. Sustaining the monarchy, that's a bit controversial. I have to say, at the Royal Commonwealth Society, yes, a little bit of that. In the last years of the Queen, there was a lot of, in consultation with the Palace, a lot of rebranding of programmes. So the essay competition became the Queen's essay competition. I was involved in setting up the Queen's Young Leaders. There was a Queen's Canopy. That branding had some benefits because it did help with some of the communications, but it's a difficult one, isn't it?
Does it now have to be changed to the King's?
I don't know. I don't actually know what's, or is it all legacy for the late monarch? Not sure.
On that note, I'm going to wrap us up by simply saying I'm going to wrap us up by simply saying there's only one way to thank this tremendous panel and yourselves for your questions, so you can clap yourselves. Give them a round of applause.